Welcome everybody to another Serpents a Day video. Today I will be discussing a little bit about South Africa. Please bear with me. The China stuff will be coming back next week. I have a lot to discuss about China. There are a lot of videos, but I have to wrap up this story. For those of you who have been following along, I already interviewed my mother and I interviewed my father about what happened to our family when I was 14 years old. And I'm going to just share my side of the story, and then I'm going to answer any questions you might have so that we can just wrap this up. I'm more than willing to be very candid and open about other experiences that I've had in South Africa. So if you have your questions, I'll be answering super chats at the end, and of course a couple of non-super chats too. So I think the best thing for us to do here, everyone, is to simply jump right into it. I'm going to play in the background just some footage that a friend of mine took in Cape Town. Now, Cape Town is where I was born, and I grew up in Cape Town. When I was 10 years old, we moved to Johannesburg. It was a massive shift for me, and of course, the two places are diametrically opposed, very different. Cape Town, as you can see, is a very beautiful place, stunningly beautiful, full of vineyards and the sea, and it's a gorgeous place. It is also the only place in South Africa that I would ever suggest anyone visit if you were planning on going to South Africa, and the reason being it is probably still the safest place in South Africa. And the reason for that is the political party that has the majority rule in Cape Town is the Democratic Alliance. They are the opposition party to the African National Congress, the ANC that you all know. The ANC, of course, is the one that was led by Nelson Mandela. And unfortunately, the ANC is a communist party. Its roots are in communism, and it's, well, very thinly veiled, but it is communist, and all of the members are communist, and they just want to destroy the country and turn it into a communist hellhole like every other communist hellhole in the past. So up in Johannesburg and Durban and so on, you are unfortunately under the ANC majority rule, and so you can see the differences. Anyway, that aside, you can see the beautiful scenery here, some of the along the wine route and so on. I just want to thank my friend Nathan for taking this footage. He took it in about 2017 or 2018. He was going to visit family, and I asked him to take a bunch of B-roll for me of South Africa so I could use it. So all the footage you're going to see in the background is going to be of Cape Town, which I must once again reiterate is still the best part of South Africa. They call it the last deck of the Titanic because, as the country's kind of regressed and the troubles started, Cape Town has always kind of been a fairly reasonable place to go and stay. So I grew up in Cape Town, then we moved up to Johannesburg, completely different place. Johannesburg was always like the financial capital of South Africa. South Africa has 3 different capitals. It's very confusing. You've got Cape Town as, some kind of capital, Pretoria, and Johannesburg. One is like a financial capital, one is a legislative capital, something like that. It's a bit of a weird mess. And when we moved up to Johannesburg, it was, of course, a big shock to me. Everything changed, my lifestyle changed, and we moved to a small holding, it's kind of like a plot, okay? So a piece of land, which was a couple of acres big, and it was outside of the city, far away from any kind of shopping malls or any kind of built-up areas. When we first moved there, it has changed over the years. And so we lived, at least I lived, a kind of a fairly isolated lifestyle. And by isolated, I mean I would be either at home or I'd be at school, and nothing really in between. I didn't go out much because everything was far away, and it was too much of a hassle for my parents to drive me into, say, a shopping mall and come pick me up and so on after work and so on. So I pretty much became very introverted during that time. I really sunk myself into my obsession with computers and technology. And I do have a very solid IT background, and I do have a lot of IT qualifications and things like that. But that's something that I did was I used to explore around the bush, and later on I did get a motorbike and start to ride around the bush on a motorcycle, and that's how I used to get out and so on. But I would like to tell you about that one day because this changed everything. Growing up in South Africa during the transition period from the previous apartheid days to, I'd say, integration and changing everything over, was a very interesting time. The high school that I went to was the first integrated high school ever in South Africa. It was called Woodmead High. And it had, even before apartheid ended and stuff, they had, sort of, it didn't matter what race you were, you could go there type thing. It was a very nice place, the high school. And I remember in primary school quite clearly when things changed when I was very young. And I think I must have been like, what was I? So around about 12 or so when things changed and, black children came to the school and joined. And it was all very natural. It wasn't a shock. It wasn't weird or anything to us. That's just how it was. I think it was, I can't even remember my age, but I was very young when that happened. Of course, the ANC won the elections in 1994 and things really changed after that. And what happened now, what I'm going to tell you in the story, happened after the fall of apartheid and after Nelson Mandela was in power. So what happened was, it was a Monday morning. Just going to get straight into the story. If you want to know any more background, you can ask me questions later. It was a Monday morning and I was feeling very sick. And I know a lot of kids, when they don't want to go to school on a Monday, they'll try to make up excuses for not going. But I was legitimately sick and I didn't want to go to school. But for whatever reason, my mom forced me to go to school. So I was like, okay, fine. I was at school. Everything was, fine. But then something strange happened. Instead of my mother coming to pick me up after school, she used to come pick me up, my uncle came and fetched me from school, after school. Now, I don't want to talk a lot about my uncle because he's a very secretive person and he's not somebody who likes to be talked about. But I can tell you that my uncle is pretty decorated in the military and he has a background in the special forces. And I'm not making this crap up, it's the truth. And he's, like I said, he's very cagey about these kind of things. So that's pretty much all I'm going to mention about him, really, because I don't want to, upset him or anything. So my uncle came and fetched me from school. And I thought this is very strange, considering I hadn't seen him for a very long time. And he just told me that something had happened at the house. And on the way back, he pretty much told me what had been going on. And if you've watched the previous interviews of my mother and my father, you'll know what happened from their point of view. But a quick recap for those of you who may have missed those. My father still runs a construction company. What he does, it's more like a landscaping and construction company, but what he does is he specializes in building water features, dams, koi ponds, that kind of thing. So, if you need a big dam on your property or you want a trout stream or a koi pond or whatever, he comes in and he can do the landscaping and anything related to that. Okay? And when I was young, when I was, I think, starting at the age of 13 or 14, he would, during my holidays or when I wasn't at school on the weekends and stuff, he would hire me to go on site and just kind of help. That was his way of, I suppose, giving me some experience and allowing me to earn some money. So he would put me on site and I'd work along with the laborers and, the typical day would be we'd get on site in the morning and we'd start working, digging holes and, mixing cement and doing all that kind of thing. And I enjoyed the physical labor. I actually enjoyed the work. It was something that feels quite rewarding, So we'd work during the day and then afterwards, of course, we'd all sit and have lunch together. I've got a lot of very interesting stories. I'll just tell you one of them quickly. There's this food that a lot of the black guys like a lot. It's called, what's it called? It's like pilchards. I think pilchards or anchovies. It's anchovies in a tin. I can't remember the name of it for the life of me now. So, something like star anchovies or something, but whatever. And it comes in this tin. And the tin has like a pink label around it. You get a very spicy version of it. And I remember we were all sitting around for lunch, and one of them had bought this tin, and we wanted to cook it. Everyone wanted to eat it, but we didn't have a can opener. So it's in this can, it's in a tin can. So one of them decides, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to put it on the ground, and we're going to try and open it with a pickaxe, okay, but very gently. So everyone's kind of, including myself, we're all crouching over this tin of this spicy pilchards, and this guy's tapping away with the end of a pickaxe to try and make a hole in it, and then at least you can try to open it up. He's tapping away. And finally, it gives way, but it created a massive splash, and it splashed this like chili pilchard or anchovy, whatever, liquid into everybody's eyes, as because we were looking at this, right? And everyone was like, had chili in their eyes and rolling around in pain. It was an interesting situation. I had a lot of these fun little adventures when I was on site, working with the men, because these guys were all much older than me, but we all got along very well. But there was one guy who was a little dodgy. I mean, there were quite a few guys that were dodgy, to be honest. And some of the stories are just hilarious. Like there was a guy called Solly, and he came to work one day and he was limping and his foot was in a bandage. And I asked him what had happened to him, and the other guys told me that he got so drunk that he slept with his foot in the campfire and it like burned half his foot off or whatever, that kind of thing. It was just a really interesting bunch of guys. But one guy was a little bit dodgy, and his name was Shadrach. And the reason I say he's a bit dodgy is I remember, and I was 14 years old at the time, and I was working with a guy. And I remember at the end of the day, everybody would kind of wash themselves off and usually use a garden hose, or, at the dams or the lakes that we were walking on, you just go do a kind of a splash, do a what we used to call a Portuguese shower, just take a little bit of water, rub it under your arms and, on your face, that kind of thing. So this guy he took off his shirt one day to like wipe down, and he had a lot of knife wounds, like healed knife wounds, and he had some prison tattoos and stuff. And the prison tattoos you get in South Africa, a lot of the guys had these tattoos actually. Usually they like they like to tattoo like an AK-47, or they tattoo a knife, or they tattoo something, but it's very badly done. It's like I don't know how they get it done in the prisons there. I guess someone takes some lead out of a pencil or something, and they do, they kind of hand draw it, but it's drawn very badly, like a kindergartner type thing. They had a lot of these. And I remember I'm pretty sure I told my old man about it, that this guy looked a bit dodgy, but whatever the case, what had happened was, it was this guy, Shadrach, and a friend of his from one of the townships had planned to do a home invasion at my house. And they did. They came in, and if you heard the story, they roughed my mother up and the secretary. They put them in the trunk of a car, tried to drive away with them, but the car wouldn't start. Sexually molested my mother, tried to rape her, but, everything just worked out that didn't happen. And they tried to shoot my mother, and because they didn't know how a revolver works, it was just all luck. Because the live round, he'd put the live round behind a hammer, and when you cock a revolver, it shifts the cylinder over, and there happened to be two spent rounds. And so when he pulled the trigger, it hit one of the spent rounds, and so it didn't go off. So he almost killed my mother, and him and his partner were waiting to kill my father when he walked in the door. But just luck would have it that my dad had forgotten to check the fish or something and walked around the corner, and he wasn't shot. And finally, when my dad caught up to one of the guys, when he found out what was happening, he didn't have a gun on him at the time. My dog, Napoleon, attacked the guy and saved my dad's life. What happened after that, I might tell all of you a little bit, but let's just say that they caught one of the guys. The other guy never was caught. Turns out he was probably a police informant, and he never saw justice. One of them got 15 years. Shadrach, he got 15 years in jail at the end of all of this, but surprisingly. Now, the whole title of this video, that I was almost murdered, is 100% if I had stayed in the house that morning and this home invasion had gone down, I would have tried to do something. And in trying to do something, I definitely would have been murdered by these guys. There are a couple of things that I'd done prior to that as well. It doesn't matter how young I was, but I remember one night specifically, my dad went fishing down at the river. And he, would go sit there. My dad was a very avid fisherman, and we had a river on the property. He'd go down to the more, what can you say, the rougher, more natural part of the river down, where there's a whole bunch of trees and bamboo and whatnot. And to get down there, you kind of have to walk through a bush path. And he goes sit there and I guess fish and drink whiskey or whatever he was doing down there. And I heard gunshots coming from that part of the property. And so I grabbed my pellet gun. I had one of those break barrel pellet guns. And so I grabbed my pellet gun and I went kind of crawling through the bush trying to see what was going on there. And I remember I was going through the bush down there near, and I just heard from in the bushes my dad say, "Hey." And he was there. He was hiding in the bush because he was hiding from whoever was shooting at him. And at the end of the day, we figured out that what had happened was one of the neighbors was either doing some target practice or something and was just shooting over the river, but happened to be shooting in the direction of where my dad was and over his head. So, I'm just using that as an example of when I was at that age, and still now, if you've heard about my stories in China and stuff, I don't stand by when someone's in trouble. And because my mother was in trouble and being roughed up, and the secretary as well, I 100% would have done anything I could to attack those guys. And they were armed, and I was a little boy, and I would have been murdered. So I barely escaped that. There have been a couple of times in my life where I have narrowly escaped death in South Africa. A lot of the times my fault, because when you're young and stupid and full of vigor, you get yourself into certain situations that you shouldn't. And I'm sure I can find some time to tell you more of those stories in the future. But anyway, I got home and it was pretty devastating to see the state that my mother was in. And there was a whole big buzz because, we had a whole bunch of people over at the property police and all that busy trying to figure things out. And things were never the same again from that point on when it comes to the way we lived, really. And remember, this was when apartheid had just finished. To be honest, it had been over for a number of years before 1994. The build up to 1994 it had been phased out, but 1994 was the official, now the ANC rules the country type thing. But everybody had embraced it with the idea that we were going to work together for a bright future of South Africa. And that unfortunately let a lot of people lower their guard, and a lot of bad things happened. And after people started to realize that things were not going to actually be that positive and great, it changed the way people lived. And you started to see people constructing like a prison around their house. Barbed wire, electric fences, security infrared beams in case anyone walks, everybody's armed to the teeth. It was a different kind of a time. And there was a lot of bad things that happened during those times, and a lot of bad things that happen today. In fact, South Africa is in a far worse place now under the leadership of the ANC than it ever was in the past. And a lot of people confuse that. They confuse that with the idea that by saying something like that I support apartheid or the apartheid government, and I don't. I don't support apartheid, and I don't support the apartheid government in any way, shape, or form. But I also don't support the ANC, who are a bunch of corrupt communists who've destroyed the country. They had the opportunity to take what was there and build South Africa into something beautiful. And what they did was they took what was there and destroyed it, stole all the money out of the Reserve Bank and the coffers and everything like that, set up all this corruption, tenderpreneurship, all this kind of nonsense, stole everything and put nothing back. And what we see now is the rape capital of the world, the AIDS infection capital of the world, and as far as I'm concerned, the crime capital of the world. We see ethnic minorities being persecuted, and it's just not a good place anymore. So, like I said, things changed. I started to carry a gun from the age of 16. Okay, I got a picture here I can show you of when I was about 20, I guess. Well, let me try and see. Let me find the pictures. I'll show you here. I gotta just see it. There we go. Sorry, not that one. That's me when I was about 19 or 18, I guess. I've still got that same jacket. That's the one I wore for conquering southern China and all that, by the way. That's me when I was 2 years old in Cape Town with a snake. I'll tell you a little bit more about that later. There I am, 20, 21. You can see there I am with my 9mm that I carried with me always, drinking a beer, because that's the most responsible thing you can do when you're armed is drink. Just kidding. There I am again. You can see I'm... Wait, there. Sorry. There you can see I'm carrying my gun. I never... For the entire time I lived in South Africa, I was never without a gun from the age of 16. I carried it with me 24/7. I slept with it next to me, or under my pillow or whatever, and I always was armed. There I am again. You can see there, carrying my gun. There's the dog Napoleon that saved my dad's life. Fantastic dog. I got him when I was 12 years old. I remember my dad bought him for me, and there was a special breeder that bred these dogs, a cross between a Neapolitan Bull Mastiff and a Great Dane. And so I called him Napoleon, because he's a Neapolitan Bull Mastiff, Great Dane. Absolutely stunning dog. And this was kind of near the end of his life here, because from the time I was 12 until about 23 or 24, that's when he died, when I was about 23, 24. But he was a fantastic dog. We had a lot of adventures together, and he did save my dad's life, and it was just a stunning animal. Okay, so let's get back to... Okay, here. Sorry, let's get this background moving forward a bit. We've seen all this junk. Okay, so somewhere here. These, by the way, what you see in the background are kind of some of the more informal settlements in Cape Town. You get them dotted all over the country, and that's where, the majority of the poorer people live, because it's very cheap to live there, etc. But they also tend to be a kind of a hub of crime. Places like Diepsloot, for instance. Things have changed somewhat. But yes, I digress. From that point on in my life, things changed. I had to be more aware of what was going on. I had to be more vigilant. I had to make sure that my family and my mother were always safe, and that my friends were always safe, and that you just couldn't take security for granted. You couldn't just pull up to your gate and stop your car and open it. No, you had to open the electric gate from up the road to make sure that you could quickly drive in and then close the gate. We had to hire armed guards. We had all sorts of very interesting situations. And I will tell you one or two more before I get to the Q&A. And in fact, I'm going to tell you a rather interesting one. You see, after I left high school, I still continued to work for my parents on and off. I actually, I must have been, again, 19 or so. I was working for my parents. And I eventually went into a full-time IT career, because I had been doing that sort of on and off. I'd been freelancing and working for internet companies and so on. But there was a lull where I stopped working at about the age of 18 or so, 18 and a half, 19. And I worked for my parents for about a year, I think it is. And then I got back into the IT stuff full-time. So I was working for my parents, and there were some new labor laws that just came out in South Africa. Now, the new labor laws meant that there would be more protection for the staff, meant they would get more time off and a whole bunch of other stuff. But there was something negative about it. I think that they would work less hours or something. I can't remember now. It was so long ago. But the labor lawyer came to bring all the documents and so on. They did like a big conference with the staff to tell them exactly what was going to happen and so on. And then I think it's a week or so later, all the guys were ready to go, and what would happen is I would meet them outside. We'd hop in one of the work trucks, and I'd drive everybody out to the work site, and then we'd get to work and do what we had to do. But in the morning, my parents gave me like a bunch of the contracts and said, can you just go outside and ask the guys to sign the contract, before you guys go to work, go on site. So fair enough. Grabbed the contracts and walked outside and called one of the guys that I knew well over first and explained to him, you guys need to sign. So he took the thing and he kind of went and walked into the crowd of all the guys there. There must have been about, 15, 20 of them there. And I guess they were very unhappy with the idea of signing the contract. And all of a sudden they turned. And I don't know how to explain this to you, but in Africa, there's this kind of tribal mentality, this mob mentality that can kick in. And it's horrendous when it happens. And you can look it up online, what happens when this mob mentality, like people get whipped into a fervor. And this is usually where they stone people to death, set them on fire, things like that in the townships when someone's accused of doing a crime or someone's accused of being a witch or, something along those lines. It in an instant, everybody this mob turns into this murderous mob that can do the most atrocious things. And it happened. Obviously, something about the contract triggered them and things were just getting out of hand. They all sort of turned on me and they all came in this big mob and they were angry and they're ready to do something and I didn't know what was going on. So I screamed at them and shouted at them and backed off and took my gun and was ready to do something, screaming at them. And because I did that, some of the other staff members that were in the office nearby, they heard me and they came out. And because a bunch of them came out and everybody was armed, it calmed down. But this is just the beginning of what happened because this got crazy. And this is another murder that I missed, by the way. Because of this new, and it's all related. That calmed down, by the way, and then they did eventually, I think they eventually postponed signing it or whatever, and they decided to bring in the lawyer. I can't remember exactly, but what happened from that point on was things kind of went back to normal for a little while. And I thought everything's cool. But what they had done is secretly a bunch of the staff members had planned together. And what they had planned was they planned to kill the family. They decided this is what they're going to do. They're going to kill my dad and my mom and everybody, and then they would take over the business and run the business. This was what they had planned, you see. So the reason we found out about this is kind of interesting. A bunch of the staff members pooled money together and they paid some hitmen in the local township. They'd paid half, like the upfront, and then they'd pay the rest when the family was dead. And the reason my father found out about this was one morning, one of the staff members just kind of came under attack by the others. Because, all the staff members would gather in the morning and they'd kind of get ready and then we'd go out, do work on site. And one of these guys, and I can't remember his name now, but he somehow had pissed off the other guys and that mob mentality thing kicked in. And they were trying to kill him with shovels and stuff. They were trying to basically kill him. And my dad stepped in and saved him from the mob and said, look, okay, you don't need to go on site today. You're not going anywhere with these guys. You can stay on the property and you can work here and do a couple of things around the property. And because my dad had saved him, he confided in my dad and said, hey, listen, they're planning this thing to kill the family. So this was an interesting situation because we had to find out what the deal was. And there's this very interesting, you can look them up online, this interesting, it's like a security company. It's called Mapocho. Mapocho Amathamaga is what it's called. And they use like a tiger for their logo. And it's kind of like a mafia vigilante, I don't really know, security company. And they operate out of the townships. And what you do is you hire them because that's one thing about these townships that you get, especially near where we were living, Deep Sloot, and there was one next to Danefern there. And I don't know, I've been into them and you drive past them sometimes, but they're not formal. So you don't have addresses, right? So you can't say I live in number 1, like shack number 3 in Deep Sloot or something like that. It's just a big hodgepodge of, people build their own little shelters and shacks and they live there. Many people don't have ID, we have an ID book, used to have an ID book in South Africa. Most people don't have legitimate IDs, a lot of illegal immigrants, a lot of people that you don't know who they are or where they're from. So that's why the crime is so difficult to fight. Because what will happen is a criminal will go do his crime and return to his shack, but nobody will be able to identify him because he's not a real person. He doesn't have a real address. He doesn't have an ID book or anything like that. So it's very difficult to find criminals inside of the townships. But Mapocho, which is kind of like this mafia organization, they know exactly how to find people inside the townships because that's what they do. They're like a mafia and they control the townships and they really rule them in a terrible way. They're awful people. But you can pay them and they'll go find someone and they'll take care of them. And by take care of them, I mean take care of them. Either get rid of them or bring them to you or whatever. You just pay them. They're a ruthless bunch. And you can look them up online and you'll find out, and you can try to see, there are a couple of documentaries talking about them, but in real life, I've seen them operate. So what happened was, my parents hired Mapocho as our new security company. You see, private security in South Africa is one of the most highest paid industries in South Africa because the police are useless and the whole country is pretty much descended into a kind of a chaos where you cannot rely on any kind of government help. The post office is useless. You don't get your post, it gets stolen, things like that. The police are useless. If you call them, they may not turn up ever. If they do turn up, it's always too late. And when they turn up, they don't really help. I've got stories about that too. So they hired Mapocho as our security company. You get the big names like ADT and all this, and they put those little badges, and they've got armed response, and they've got medical response and all that, because that's necessary in South Africa. There's a lot of murder and rape and things like that. So when there's a home invasion, if you press your panic button, by the time they get there, they have to be able to try to resuscitate you if you've been shot or stabbed or whatever it is. And they need to provide medical assistance to rape victims and whatever else. But now Mapocho are also a security company, and they put up those signs with the tigers. And I tell you what, that's a big deterrent, because the criminals in the township know that if they mess with Mapocho, they can get into some serious trouble. These other ADT and whatever, they'll never catch them. So they hired Mapocho to be the security company for the property, okay, and for the business. And then they got Mapocho to round up all the guys to try and find out what was going on with this plot, because, the plot had been exposed. But of course, none of the staff were talking. You couldn't say like, hey, what's going on? And I was there, and it's the most bizarre thing that I've seen in a very long time. So Mapocho turned up in a minibus taxi type thing, right? So they pull up there. It's got their logo on it. And out comes this like very strong, massive, muscular man and a bunch of others. And this big fat mama, okay? This huge fat mama comes out of there too. And what they did was they spoke to the staff for about a minute. And within a minute, they all confessed and pointed out who the ringleaders were, who had kind of decided to put the hit on my family. And they I remember this very clearly. They lined them up against a work truck that we had there. Lined them all up. And they said, now we're going to give you water medicine. And I didn't understand what water medicine was. Of course, I found out what water medicine is. But they took... At first, I didn't really know what was going to happen here, because you got these really big, strong guys, and like I said, this big, fat mama. What they did was they took a bucket of water, filled up with water, and they took a sjambok. Now, a sjambok is this big leather whip that you get in South Africa. It's kind of leather or made out of a kind of a rubber or something. It's huge. It's as tall as a man, okay? And you whack things with it, and it's probably the most painful thing that you can get hit with at all. And they got one of the guys, and they stuck his head in the water, and they whipped him, like, really hard. But they didn't use the big muscle guy to whip him. They got the fat mama to do it, because in African tradition, for a woman to hit a man is very... what can I say? Embarrassing. It's unheard of. It's not something that can be done, but they do it on purpose to humiliating. That's the word I was looking for. So this big mama comes, and one of the other guys is holding the guy's head in a bucket and smacks this guy, so that, of course, Reflex breathes in the water, almost, dies from drowning type thing. And that was to get him to confess, and he confessed. And I was watching this. It's bizarre. The next thing, one of the guys, they line the other guys up and they're just going to punish them now. So they whip the crap out of these guys, and these guys are really just like, if you get hit with a sjambok, I don't care how hard you're going to feel this. So they whip these guys kind of one by one until they're like basically rolling around on the ground, and then they say, okay, you can go back, get back in line type thing. But one guy, he was trying to be a tough guy. I remember him very clearly. I can't remember his name, but they whacked him. Whack. And you could see he really, because they're hitting them on the ass or whatever, you could see that he was feeling pain, but he pretended he didn't. So he just stood there kind of smiling as if nothing was okay. And this fat mama was smacking him with his sjambok. And so about three or four hits and nothing. So she called over that big muscular guy, and he took the sjambok, and he hit the guy so hard that he jumped over the work truck from the force and the pain of this thing. I'll never forget seeing this, okay? Anyway, at the end of the day, it was resolved, and believe it or not, the staff members that had plotted to kill us and had all put in money and stuff still continued to work for my old man and work for the company, most of them. Some of them just disappeared. I don't know what happened to them. They disappeared. Maybe Mapocho took them out. I don't really know. But one thing that was very interesting that we found out was, although there'd been a hit on the family, they wanted to kill my mother, my father, and my sister. But they didn't want me killed. And I think the reason is because I was working with them all the time. We were friends, and they probably thought that they just wouldn't kill me because they liked me or something like that. So that's the second time I narrowly escaped murder. In fact, my entire family narrowly escaped murder. And I have many more stories along these lines, but I thought I'd just share that one with you here because it's probably something you won't experience yourself. Anyway, I'm pretty much done with the story for now. I'm going to start hitting the super chats and answer your questions, guys. So let me just bring these up and let's see what we got. Okay. Thank you, Dennis. Dennis says, hoping you gain citizenship someday. Thank you. Me too. That's the dream. If it's possible, I would love that. BBS on John says, BB Son John says, I've always wanted to learn more about Africa. It is unreported in the news. Thanks for the stream. Absolutely. I actually have a thing I'm going to tell you guys all about in a minute, where you can find out more about Africa. Okay. Madsif Jada says, did you feel safe as a child/teen in South Africa? As a child growing up in Cape Town, I did feel safe. But I think most children don't really realize what's going on around them. But there was a lot of unrest. There was a lot of bad things happening. I do remember things like certain roads being closed because people were being stoned and the cars were being stoned and there was unrest and people being burnt to death and things. I do remember this kind of thing just from discussion, but I was too young to really understand what was going on. As a teenager, up until the home invasion, I felt fairly safe. After the home invasion happened, it really opened my eyes to what was really going on. And from that point on, no, I didn't feel safe. Audra Noel Zenitram says, appreciate you and what you do. Much love and luck for your further endeavors. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that, mate. Okay. Now from the PS4 Nerf PS4 says, hi, and this is South African Rand, so it must be a fellow South African. Hi, Winston, love what you do. Please do more videos on SA. Can you please do a meet and greet next time you're in SA? Here's some cool drink money. Thank you so much. Yeah, if I ever go back to South Africa, it'll be a miracle. I plan to, if possible, avoid ever going back to South Africa for the rest of my life. But if I do go back, it'll be Cape Town. But thank you so much. Jackie Agat says, what do you think the future of non-blacks in South Africa will be? Not good. And I hate to say it because I've always tried to not divide the different groups in South Africa by race, but unfortunately you have to. The white minority in South Africa is racially profiled for a number of things. I experienced it myself. There's a lot of resentment after apartheid. So a young white man like myself driving on the streets, they would pull me over all the time. Like, no joke, they would pull me over all the time and just check my car. And, oh, your tire tread's not great, you're going to have to pay a fine. Or where's that emergency triangle? It's not in your car, you got to pay a fine. I got beaten up by the cops once very badly, and that's a story for another day. In South Africa, the black police beat the crap out of me, split my ear, my whole side of my face was messed up. I'm still like, one side of my face droops a little more than the other, and that's from being severely beaten up by the police. That happened to me. There are all kinds of situations where, as a white person or an Indian person or someone who's not part of the majority, which, the majority Bantu people is like, 80-something%, you're targeted for crime, 100%. If you're a white person, you got to watch out because you're targeted for crime more than any other person in South Africa, any other demographic. Indians too get targeted, Chinese get targeted. Anyone who's not part of the majority get targeted because you're seen as, oh, you've got money, you're going to be an easy target, So it's a tough thing. Right now, the way the ANC works, like every other communist government, is they need to blame somebody for their shortcomings. So when they start to fail, when they can't keep the infrastructure running, and now you have power failures all the time, and you've got load shedding and so on, they have to blame someone, and they need an out. And their out is always to blame apartheid, and it's always to blame the white people. And now what they're doing is they're passing bills to nationalize and be able to take people's farms and land without any compensation. And that's their next step, of course. And it'll get to a point where it's going to be a free-for-all where they can just take anything they want from a specific demographic. And it's going to be the white people, and then it's going to be the Indian people, then it's going to be whatever. It's just a mess. So there are only about 3 million white people in South Africa right now, I think, in total. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the population is 50, 60, 70 million, somewhere around there. There's a very small percentage of white people in South Africa. And the majority of people I know who have the chance to leave have left. Cape Town's still a bit of a stronghold. Like I said, the last deck of the Titanic for Europeans, for whatever reason, that's where they are. And it's really, at the end of the day, I have to stress that it's not just about race. It's not about black, white, Indian, etc. It's about everybody in South Africa. Everybody's suffering because of the bad leadership of the ANC. So whether you're a black person or a white person, the future of South Africa is not looking very good. You'll be able to pick the bones of what's left there for a while, and when that's done, everyone's done. So it's not looking great. Chol Banini, bro, I've been watching you for over 4 years. Just wanted to send big love, and I dream of you going through Russia on your bike in the future. Thanks, mate. I really appreciate that, and I can't wait to do something like that. And we've planned it. We're going to do the Trans-Siberian Railway at some point. Sam Peter, on a lighter note, what is the worst insult you've heard from an Afrikaner? The most deep cutting I've heard is, you're not a serious person. I felt lucky it wasn't said to me. Sup to Winston's dad. Cool. From an Afrikaner, let's see. Just a common insult will be like, you bliksem. Bliksem is just means lightning, but it also means to punch. It's a weird situation. I'll bliksem you means I'm going to punch you. But you can call someone a bliksem. That's just a very normal thing. Your mur, or your is just like you piece of shit. You poes, it means you pussy or whatever. There's a couple of these things. The worst that I've ever been called, though, let me think. I don't know, because usually, to be honest, the insults are not that scathing. I'll say, domkop, which means a stupid head, or a kak, which just means shit, or they like to call soties Engelsman or soti or whatever. It just means soetbiel, that kind of thing. Yeah, I can't think of any particular one that really scathed, because it's kind of, I don't know. The insults are it's more the way they're said, to be honest, than the words themselves. Because, Afrikaans is a very guttural language. It can be very harsh sounding when you speak it right. But it's also one of the most fun languages to swear in. Okay, Hontas Farmer says, does it bother you that us Americans who hear your stories often equate them to race issues here? I mean, South Africa has a very different history. Yes, it really bugs the crap out of me. hugely. You have no idea how much it annoys me because it's a completely different situation. You cannot equate a country that is majority black, that is run by a 100% black government, that is, got a very small minority of white people, and you cannot compare it to a place like America where there's a majority white people and a minority black community. It's the opposite. So when people try to equate what's going on in South Africa to what's going on with African Americans, it's garbage. You cannot equate the two at all. And it does make me angry when people try to make it out as if it's like America's the most racist place in the world, because the people that have grown up here are so spoiled they wouldn't see or understand real racism unless it came and smacked them in the face. So yes, it annoys the crap out of me, and I want to talk about it more in the future, but it's a sensitive topic, and it's so difficult to talk about this because a lot of Americans have been so indoctrinated their entire lives that they have to try and prove for some reason that America is worse than everywhere else. So if you say the racism in America isn't that bad, because it isn't, it's the least racist country in the world, and I know this from experience. If you try to talk to them about this, they kind of get into this defensive mode where they try to say, oh yeah, well, what about this? And they'll like give you some anecdote or some crap about a thing that hit the news or downtown Chicago or whatever the hell else, or George Floyd or something like that. And you see this petty argument, this petty person trying to prove, look at me, we are worse, I want to claim that victory, that we're actually worse. When meanwhile, these incidents, if you look at George Floyd in particular, is a great example to show how not racist America is. The fact that the death of a criminal can spark a revolution and make change, and one criminal's death becomes something that is, his life is celebrated and everybody respects him, and it moves everything forward, shows you how not racist America is. Because if America was racist and George Floyd was killed by a cop, everybody be celebrating that he was dead, and they'd be like, cool, move on, let's kill the next one. That would be a racist country, but it's not. That proves to you right there how not racist America is. The fact that the death of a criminal can be used to start this massive movement to help end any potential racism, So anyway, we can talk about this all day, but there's no point. Thank you for the question. Al Young, you grew up in the Wild West. Thanks for the nice Saturday surprise. It's an absolute pleasure, mate. Thank you. Lightseeker, thank you for illuminating important neglected truths. Hashtag Winston 2024. Unfortunately, I can't run for president, but you know who can? My daughter can one day. Jianxin Wu. Thank you very much. Next we have, it's doing that weird thing where, okay, there it is. Do you think Trump was being unfairly criticized over everything? I know it's not related to the vid, but I believe you are wise due to an outsider view. Yeah, absolutely. I think he was being unfairly criticized for everything. And the reason I say that is, from an outsider's perspective, when you read the American news, for the entire time he was the president, all you could ever see was like tabloid-style headlines complaining about what Trump ate for breakfast, or, what underwear he used, or what a bad person he was. And it was just a massive attack on the man the whole time. Now, whether he deserved those attacks or not is a different story, but I know for a fact that it was a very unfair attack on the person, because a lot of what he did as far as the policies are concerned towards China and so on were correct, and were actually better than some of his predecessors and the guy who's in power right now, A lot of what he did not deserve to be criticized so harshly. A lot of what he did deserve to be criticized harshly, But just from an outsider's perspective, I'd say that he was treated kind of unfairly by the press, because that's all you ever saw. Anyway, Ryer MKD says, yes. Mao D. Mighty said, in my travels, I met a few South Africans, good folk, great drinking buds, generally awesome people. Thoughts on Trevor Noah and De Antwoord? I don't like Trevor Noah, and that's because he, I don't, I don't like to try and attack celebrities. That's not what I do. You know, so many people make Serpent-Zade exposed videos and Serpent-Zade is a liar and all that. But I don't like Trevor Noah, and that's because he's taking advantage of his background in order to curry favor with the kind of political elite here in America. And he's very disingenuous about certain things. And where was he when the riots broke out recently? You know, I talked about them in a recent video, where the country was just basically brought to a standstill by looting and burning and destroying and destruction. Where was he on that? He's very vocal when it comes to BLM or any of these other protests, but when South Africa goes through these terrible, terrible situations, he's completely silent. So I personally think that he's a little bit of a fair weather friend / coward type person. Just my own personal opinion. As far as the Antwoord, I mean, a lot of people ask me about the Antwoord. I don't like them again because they're, you know, everything they stand for is very low class in South Africa. It's a very low class, this Zef thing. It's kind of like, what would you think about hillbillies in a redneck, you know, drenching themselves in deer blood and singing about, I don't know, tying someone's shoelaces together whilst farting in their face? You know, you're probably not going to like those people very much, but maybe some people from overseas see it as a novelty and latch onto it. You know what I mean? Okay. In Hot Water, can you explain Muti magic and albino sacrifices? Look, Muti magic is a big issue in South Africa. You've got witch doctors. They're called Sangoma. And the Sangoma, they come up with what's called Muti. And Muti is like a magic potion, okay? And unfortunately, a lot of their magic potions require body parts, and specifically body parts from children, or body parts from specific type of people like albinos, or, you know, whatever. And so it results in a lot of traditional medicine murders, you could say, because it's profitable for someone to kill a child and take a specific body part, normally a penis or a hand or an arm or an ear or whatever the hell it is. And then the medicine man will obviously buy it for a very high price, because then he can mix some special muti. And the muti that then can be for any number of things. In fact, there was that terrible Marikana mine massacre. And I have to tell the story because you can look it up, it's true. What happened was there were some miners on strike. And when I talk about miners, I don't mean little kids. I'm talking about, you know, digging the ground for coal and gold and stuff, that kind of miners. So they were on strike. And so the police came there. This is not too many, maybe 10 years ago. So the police all came there. They're all armed, and they're there to stop the unrest. And there was a medicine man, and he mixed a special muti for the strikers, okay? Now this muti, he said, if you drink this muti, it will make the policemen's guns will malfunction. If they try to fire at you, the guns won't work, and you'll be invincible. But, and the medicine man warned them, please look this up, I'm not making this up, this is true. The medicine man warned them, take this muti and you will be invincible, but if you see a rabbit and you kill a rabbit, then it's not going to work. And so these guys all paid the medicine man. They all drank this magic potion that's supposed to make the guns malfunction or whatever. And they're all on this hill, and some of them see a rabbit, and they chase the rabbit, and they killed the rabbit, even though the medicine man said you shouldn't. It's true. I'm not making this up. And then they all decided to charge the police. So the police are all there, and they all charged the police, and the police shot and killed a whole lot of them. It was disgusting. It was a massacre. It was terrible news. But that can explain to you a little bit about the muti situation. Muti is something that is taken very seriously by people in South Africa, within the townships and, you know, the traditional Bantu people. They believe in it, that if you can drink muti, you can cure AIDS. You can drink muti to make someone fall in love with you. You can drink muti to become rich. You can drink muti to become invincible, that kind of thing. So it's a pretty messed up thing, that whole traditional African medicine thing. Mr. Langdog, thank you. Jennifer, I remember my mom telling me about my uncle being carjacked at gunpoint like it was a normal family story. I know relatives who've escaped it, though. Yes. Well, you know, my sister was hijacked at gunpoint one night, and they took her iPod and her whatever she had on her, and thank goodness that's all they did. And I have to tell you that every single friend and family member of mine in South Africa has been hit by crime in one way or the other, to different levels of severity, but not a single person has escaped it. That's just how bad it is in South Africa. John Bowring says, how do you avoid becoming racist, even just a bit, in the face of this kind of thing? It's a struggle. I've mentioned it before, but every single bad thing that has happened to me and my family has been at the hands of a black man. Every single one. And when you grow up, and, you know, my childhood friend who's, what is the date today? So 21st. The last time I saw her was on the 24th of August, and probably around 2010 or so. I can't remember. So I went to my friend's wedding up in Dalian, and his sister had flown in from South Africa, and I grew up with her. She's like my little sister. I warned her not to go back to South Africa because, you know, it's dangerous. And I'm not going to tell the whole story out of respect for the family, but basically what happened was, it was about 2 weeks later, she was murdered, murdered by a black man. And, you know, when your childhood friend is murdered by a black man, your mother's roughed up and sexually molested and put in the trunk of a car by a black man, when you've been shot at yourself by black people, when you've been beaten up by black police, when you've had your sister hijacked at gunpoint by a black man, when every single, like, awful thing, plots against your family to kill your family by black men, when every single awful thing in your life has happened to you is because of a black man, it's very difficult not to blame black people. And that has probably been the toughest thing in my life to overcome, is to not allow myself to become a racist and not allow myself to blame a specific race or a type of person for, being awful, if you know what I mean. And I've clung to this my entire life to try and give everybody a chance, regardless of where they come from and regardless of their race and who they are. And I try very hard to treat everybody like an individual, because it is not fair for you to judge a person by the way they look. And I get that too, people, you tell them you're a South African, you're white South African, the first thing they'll say is like, oh, you're racist, you apartheid, all this kind of stuff. I grew up with that too, and I understand what it's like for people to judge you based on the color of your skin, or when you're in South Africa, you're white, they blame you for all the problems in the past, or they expect that you're rich or something like that because of the color of your skin. It's not good to be typecast because of the color of your skin. So because, if I'd continued to live in South Africa, things would be different. But I left South Africa, and after leaving South Africa and, letting it pass through my system, I was able to normalize again. And I have some fantastic black friends, and I always had black friends in South Africa. I know people say that's an excuse, racist, to say, oh, look, I've got black friends, but I do. I have Chinese friends, I got black friends. I don't care. I have friends who are friends. And I do believe personally that a good person is a good person and a bad person is a bad person. And, doesn't matter what race you are, there will always be people smarter than me. There'll be people stupider than me. There'll be people the same level as me. And it doesn't matter what race they are. And I like to judge people on an individual level. And I give everybody a chance. And I'm not going to lie to you and tell you that if I meet a black person that I don't expect certain behavior or I don't expect to be let down, but I still give them the exact same chance as I do when I meet a Mexican person or a white person or anything like that. And that's just based on my own personal experience. It's different in America, though. The black people that I've met in America, I cannot for the life of me see the difference between myself and them as far as culture and everything else is concerned, for the most part. So yeah, it was very difficult not to become a racist because of my experiences, but I think I've successfully pulled it off, That's just the way life is. Everybody will always have their biases and whatever based on what's happened to them in the past, of course. But, a racist, I am not. Okay, March says, what are the gun laws in South Africa? Are they enforced or enforceable? I've seen a South African with Armalite rifles, so I'd imagine they're not that bad. Look, things changed. I have a gun license for South Africa. You have to, it's different. In America is super easy to get guns in comparison. I'm not saying it's, you can't just like walk in and buy a gun and walk out. But in South Africa, you need to pass, safety courses. It's not like in America where you just answer a questionnaire. You actually have to go on a course and, do live round shooting and all this and have an instructor. It has to be approved by the police. I know when I got my gun, it wasn't as bad, but things have changed since because the communist government is trying to get rid of firearm ownership, and they've been trying to gradually chip away at it. So you used to be able to have a collection of guns, like in America, you could have as many as you want, really. Then they chipped it down to you're allowed to have one pistol, one rifle, one shotgun, something like that. And they've introduced all sorts of funny laws, and now you have to like reapply for your gun license every so often and go on all these different courses, and you have to certify for certain things. So they're trying very hard to basically make it impossible to own a firearm as a public citizen in South Africa. That's their end goal. It's not that bad just yet, but that's where they're going. What do you think about Afghanistan right now? It's an awful situation. We talked about that yesterday in the live stream on ADV Podcasts. We talked about it at length, so I suggest you go listen to that. Thank you. Mortis Stritmatter, I guess, says, I watched Lord of War and Blood Diamond on a whim. How do you feel about the portrayal of Africa? Also some money to help where you see fit. Thank you. You know what? I loved Blood Diamond. I never liked Leonardo DiCaprio growing up. And I think it's because that was the heartthrob when I was in high school. All the girls loved him, and, you get jealous or whatever as a young man. You're like, screw that guy, I hate him. But when I watched Blood Diamond, it changed my entire opinion about him because he was very, very well acted. He got the accent down perfectly for like a Dutchman, Rhodesian. It was great. I absolutely loved the movie, and it's accurate too. So Blood Diamond is a fantastic movie. If you haven't watched it, I suggest you watch it. It's a very accurate portrayal of that side of the world. PB says, well, you certainly led an interesting life. How's the 78 Trans Am coming along? I'm so excited. It's 80% done. Pretty much everything's painted. It's just being reassembled. It's still, the body shop is slow. It's going to take another month or two, but it's getting there. It's so close. And I'll do a big update on the Worthless Whips channel soon. Joseph Doyle, have you ever thought that the mentality... Oh, sorry. I'll jump in again. There we go. Have you ever thought that the mentality of black versus white is similar to why can't I read this word? Sectarianism, okay, of Northern Ireland, and the difference of skin not being a giveaway but religion. Oh, I see what you mean. It's tough. Look, in South Africa, it has always been the political party, specifically the ANC, has always used this as a tool, is the difference between black and white, is how they drive their agenda further. That's how they do it. It's exacerbated a lot because, especially after the end of apartheid, I was part of a generation that wasn't, wasn't a part of apartheid. The black schoolmates that I had were of the same socioeconomic background as I am. They were, middle class, just like I was. Same sort of people. I went to school with some very bright black kids, and, we got along well. It looked like everyone was going to get along well in the future. And the political parties, they push this agenda, in order to do whatever they want to do, to seize whatever power they want to seize. And unfortunately, all it led to at the end of the day was kind of a resentment between the races. And as much as people pretend to get along in South Africa of different races, it's not really true. It's just a facade. It's on the surface, And it's unfortunate because I was incredibly hopeful. And I thought that I didn't think I'd ever leave South Africa. I thought things were going to work out, but they didn't. So yeah, it's just tough. As far as the thing in Ireland with the different religions, I don't really know enough about that to comment on it too much, unfortunately. But thank you for the question. Jordan Thomas, do you think land expropriation will occur in South Africa? Yes, it will. And the reason I say that is it's only a matter of time. The ANC has drained all of the coffers of the government, so they've stolen so much money, it's ridiculous. The infrastructure's failing, all this kind of stuff. So they have to answer to the people. The people want to know, what the hell? Where are all these jobs you promised us? Where's all the wealth that you promised us? What's going on? So in order to keep the people at bay, they're going to eventually have to reach a point where they've stolen everything. They have nothing else to give or to show for it. And they're going to have to move on to the next phase, which is to take land from people and give it to the people type thing. They're going to have to take land away from legitimate owners and just give it to the masses to calm them down. Take assets from whoever has assets. Doesn't actually matter in the future. I don't think it'll matter whether you're black or white. They'll just take all the assets from everyone and distribute it to the people. That's what communists do. And so it is going to happen. It's just a matter of time. It's just how quickly they run out of other resources is really what's going to, prevent that. Stephen Williams, thank you for sharing your story with us. I wish we could bring the farmers to the USA where they can be safe and feed the world. Yeah, I mean, there's nothing. You have no idea how good the farmers in South Africa are. They're world class, especially the Boere. What they managed to do with the land is incredible, and that's why it didn't work in Zimbabwe, and it's not going to work in South Africa, because you cannot give a farm to people who do not understand how to work the land properly. And that's what the Boere know, the Afrikaans farmers and the white farmers in South Africa. Generations upon generations of growing up, working the land and understanding how it all works has made them into some of the best farmers in the world. And so if you get someone who's inexperienced to come in there and try to take over, they fail every single time. And you can look at Zimbabwe and you will see South Africa will have the same thing. Okay, Mustaf Jada, what country in Africa has the brightest future? There are a lot of... I always... In my mind, Kenya pops up a lot. And Botswana's not bad either. And of course, I'm talking about sub-Saharan Africa here. Northern Africa is different. Obviously, you've got Egypt and Morocco and all that kind of stuff. And that's a different kettle of fish. But there are quite a number of African countries that do have a bright future. And it's unfortunate to see that South Africa is not one of them. And that's because, unfortunately, the ruling party in Africa is... South Africa, is just an awful communist hateful government, Vic London, what relationship did you have with Indians in South Africa? One of my best friends growing up was Indian. His name was Nitash, and I used to stay over at his place all the time, and we'd play Nintendo and stuff. Fantastic guy. And another one of my best friends, you may have seen him, is Dark. I met with him in Japan. He lives in Japan now, and we started a magazine together. I'd say that my relationship with Indians in South Africa has been very strong. And for whatever reason, I just grew up with a lot of Indian friends. Okay, Hanamaru Alice says, hey Winston, just curious, is the level of racism from Africa the same as the ethno-state of China, or is Africa another side of the coin, or a level below? Okay, this is a difficult one to answer. Chinese racism is blunt and in your face and out there. They are incredibly racist, but they are an ethno-state. They don't try to pretend to be anything else. I mean, you're either Chinese or you're not. You cannot become a Chinese citizen if you're not Chinese. You will never be accepted as being Chinese unless you are, by blood, Chinese. South Africa is a little different. You can become a South African citizen no matter if you're Chinese or Indian or white or black or whatever the case may be, Zimbabwean or whatever. You can become a citizen. It's a different kind of a thing. And there is, at least in polite society, a facade where everyone pretends to be very politically correct and get along with each other. And of course, there are genuinely people that get along with each other in South Africa. You cannot discount true friendships, etc. And like I said, I do have some real African friends. I'm African too, by the way, so that just makes sense that I'd have African friends. But I do have black friends that are actually just my peers that I grew up with. Don't forget, I went to school, with a lot of Zulu people and Xhosas and, various other types, Shonas and that sort of thing, and genuine friends. I've got them on Facebook. We talk to each other, I don't see them because they're not here anymore. But I'd say China's more like in-your-face racist, but South Africa's more malicious racist. People will, target you for crime because of your race, kill you because of your race, that kind of thing. It's a different kind of racism. Martin Schemmel. Are you going to tell your daughter about the politics you talk about to us, or will you try to keep her distance from these topics? Yeah, look, here's the thing. My daughter's in a bit of a strange situation because she's neither South African nor Chinese. She's American. She has an American citizenship. And so I'm going to respect her outlook on life as I grow up. I don't want her to have any of the hangovers I have and any of the hangovers that my wife has. And hopefully she can grow up as a very well-balanced individual. You see, if I can help it, she will never go through the hardships that I went through growing up. And, or the hardships that her mother went through growing up. She's now in a position to grow up with, within a fantastic society where you've got people from all different backgrounds that respect each other and at least work towards living together. Whether they actually like each other or not, it's a different story. But, America is a fantastic place. I cannot say it enough because people don't believe me, especially because they're so poisoned by years and years of the media telling them certain things and years of victim mentality or whatever it is, or guilt or whatever it is. They just don't like to hear this. But when I tell people that America is the least racist country in the world, they hate it so much. But it's true. If any of these people who moan about America being so racist were to live in China for 14 years like I did, learn the language and the culture, or live in South Africa, or live in the Middle East, or any of these other places for 10 plus years, they would change their tune. And I tell you one thing, and I've said this before, but specifically first worlders that come from America, Australia, Canada, all those places, who lived in China with me, or that I knew who lived in China for any amount of time, they only really start to appreciate their home countries after living there for a while. Of course, there's a honeymoon period where they'll be enjoying everything and everything's great. But after a couple of years, they suddenly realize just what it is they left behind and just what it is that made their country so fantastic in the first place. Ewa Regmer says, your channel is my safe zone on YouTube. No fights, no hate. Simply informative and fresh. Never change. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Thank you. JFM Vid, your father referred to a Rhodesian person in his story and explained why he didn't call him a Zimbabwean. I hope your parents don't romanticize the former oppressive regimes in South Africa. That was basically government-allowed white privilege. Well, that's not something that is up to me to decide whether they think a certain way about a certain thing. But, we should talk in facts and truth. And when he was talking about a Rhodesian, it's because when the guy left Rhodesia, it was still called Rhodesia, not Zimbabwe yet. So I think that's fair. Catch Bay. Is the cause of the collapse in South Africa Swedish support for ANC or the movie Lethal Weapon? Probably Lethal Weapon 2. Yeah. Anyway, Brian says, white people die by police in the US too. The media doesn't report it. Google Tony Timper. Well, I mean, yeah, there's no doubt that more white people are killed by the police than black people are in America. I think the statistic is, but that's just the way it is. You have to be able to step back and not get involved, if possible, in all of this. I think the people that win in this kind of situation with what's going on in America are the people that can stand back and see it for what it is and continue to be American. And, the core of being an American, from what I can see, the part of being American that I can appreciate the most is how everybody is there for each other to help out. And I see this all the time. I was driving through just the other day. I just got back, by the way, from across the country. I went to New York City for a couple of days, and then from there I went to Pennsylvania. And there's a reason for this, and I'll tell you all about it in the future. It's something big I'm working on, hopefully, and it's something that I hope all of you guys enjoy. But I was in New York City, and I was sitting at the intersection, and a woman in an old RAV4, Toyota RAV4, she stalled her car in the middle of the intersection, and it was a really clapped out one. And for some reason, I don't know what it is, but in New York, you see a lot of junk cars on the road. they all suck. It's hard to, when you've been living in California, most cars are pretty okay here. But in New York, you just see a lot of beaters on the road. So it was a junk old RAV4, and she stalled. Middle of the intersection, busy traffic. Now, I was just there. She stalled out. Her passenger jumped out, a lady, and she came to the back to try and push it out of the intersection. Now, there's no way she could have pushed it because it was on an uphill. But within less than a minute, there was a black woman, a black man, a white man, another woman, like all came and helped her push the car across the intersection. And that's what makes America great, is that people help each other. And I know everybody out there tries to pretend that there's a huge racial divide and that everybody's at each other's throats here, but it's not true. People help each other, and that's what really is the best part about America, is everyone getting along. Anyway, I keep going on about this. Let's move on. Felix Hampapa. Hi, Winston. Greeting from the Czech Republic. Why did you choose the US for living instead of some European country like England, where your ancestors are from? Pretty simple. I like American cars and the car culture. And it's my dream to work on cars as a hobby. And America's the place to be. And that's why I have a 1978 Trans Am with a screaming eagle on the hood. And with a big, lumpy, inefficient V8, which makes very little power but a lot of noise. And that's what I want. I want to be able to work on my cars on my driveway and have a beer. And that's kind of my ideal thing. So that's why I'm here. But in all honesty, this is the best place to be for what I do. My business partner, Seamilk, lives here in America. We work together, so it makes sense that I'm here. It's a free country. I don't need to worry about the police busting down the door because I said something online, about the CCP. There's rule of law over here. So if ever there is any issue for anything, you will be treated at least with a modicum of fairness. So I like America. It's where I wanted to be, and I love it here. Vic London, your dad has amazing stories. He's one tough dude. Yeah, so now, everybody, I want to bring this up. Okay, before we continue, there's a couple more questions to answer, only a few, but this is important. Let me bring this out. Is this the right one? Let me get it over here. Okay. I need your help, okay? I've been working on a plan to try and get my parents out of South Africa. Okay. It's very difficult, especially at their age, to get them out. They're in their early 60s. And getting out of mid-60s, I should say, something like that. To get out of South Africa is a tough thing to do. I've been working on a plan which might work, might not work, we never know, to try and get them out, but it's difficult for people to start a new life. What I did was a couple of years ago, when my parents visited me in America, is I filmed a bunch of my dad's stories and I put them up on a YouTube channel. And these are the stories that I grew up with. Instead of having bedtime stories, my dad didn't read me from a bedtime story from a book. He used to come and sit down in my room, my sister as well. And he would tell us some of his adventures growing up in Africa. Because, my dad's a bit of a wild man. He used to hang out in the bush and go and catch snakes and, have encounters with crocodiles and lions and all this other sort of thing. And he'd go off on these bush adventures. That was his thing, is he'd go camping in the middle of the bush and go to catch snakes and things. So he's had a lot of interesting adventures. So I thought, why not film some of these? And, other people could hear these too, because they're fantastic. Some of the stories I lived through myself. And they are really great adventure stories of Africa. So I put them up. There's a website. There's a link in the description. His channel is called Surviving Africa. And I'm hoping to build it to a point where it can start to earn a little bit of money and help them with potentially getting out of South Africa in the future. I know that's a bit of a pipe dream, but it's something that could help. So it's recently, because of a lot of my followers, I recently kind of advertised it, and it's almost at 10,000 subscribers. If you could do me a favor and head on over and just subscribe to it, it would help immensely. I would really appreciate it. And there are a lot of interesting stories. I think you'll enjoy them, and there'll be more stories coming in the future. So don't worry, there'll be kind of probably weekly or bi-weekly stories coming on there. And they are fun. And you can probably get a bit of an idea where I come from, some of the adventures and things like that. So if you don't mind going and subscribing to that, I would absolutely appreciate it very, very much. Thank you. Well, that was unexpected. I'm back. Sorry about that, guys. Had an issue with the router going offline. So, sorry, what I was saying was, I would very much appreciate if you could go and subscribe to my dad's channel. It would help immensely with this plan I have for trying to get him out of South Africa, get my family out of South Africa. It would really help. Anyway, back to the questions. And sorry for that mishap with the internet. Should be fine from now on. We have over here, generic commenter. Been following you since 2013 and wanted to thank you for the great content over the years. Well, thank you so much. Gustavo Morales, do you want to become a US citizen someday? Absolutely, I would love that. Let me get the background back over here so that you guys can continue to see some South Africa in the background, Cape Town anyway. JMF Vid, how many times have you ever said the K word? I don't say that word. It's illegal to say that word in South Africa. That's, you know, the South African equivalent of the N word is based on Arabic for non-believer. So you can look it up. Matthew Ollis, thanks for the vid. Keep up the work. Do you think it's better, quality of life crime, to live in South Africa or China? I would say the quality of life in South Africa is better for a few things. When it comes to options for hobbies and that kind of thing, but it's worse when it comes to crime. You know, you have to live in a prison. China has its fair amount of crime, but it's usually petty stuff like theft and that kind of thing. So it's not great. You still have to have bars on your windows and stuff in China, but at least you can walk around freely and you don't have to worry about being arbitrarily mugged or murdered or whatever the case might be. It's a different thing altogether. But I'd say China's better for crime. South Africa is better for choice of lifestyle type thing. Matthew Ollis, thank you for the vid. Keep up the good work. Oh, no, that's what I just read. Sorry. JMF vid, you say you don't like the Antwoord. What about Freshly Ground or Steve Hofmeyr? Not really my cup of tea, man. Steve Hofmeyr is like an Afrikaner, and his songs are very much, you know, focused towards that demographic. I'm not Afrikaans, so it doesn't, you know, I don't know Freshly Ground, so apologies for that. JL, thanks for your perspective on China, South Africa, and living in the US. I'm happy to have a person of your high intelligence and good values become a US citizen. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate the sentiment. Hi there. Said, it had nothing to do with luck. Your mother and father had divine intervention. The grace of God was with your family that day. Think about it. I mean, yeah, sure. That's one way to describe what happened that day. You know, a lot of things in my life I could say are down to luck or divine intervention or whatever. I should have died many times in South Africa. And that's what keeps me going a lot of the time, you know. Every time life hits a bit of a roadblock and it seems like it's really difficult to overcome, I just remember the fact that I probably shouldn't even be here in the first place. Ryan McKenna. Any efforts to organize an exodus from South Africa? So much corruption and abuse of people's goodwill. No more whites, no more problems, right? Wish granted. I mean, I honestly wish everybody had the opportunity to leave South Africa, no matter what their demographic was. It's not a good place. Unless you are a fervent ANC supporter and you want to live that kind of lifestyle, I wish everybody could just get out. Egris00. Hi, Winston. Thank you for what you do. We need your level-headed thinking. Stay awesome. Thank you. JMF Vid, what are the attitudes in South Africa regarding QAnon? What are your views specifically regarding QAnon? I don't have any views regarding QAnon. LNS, your time in all these different cultures and countries, there has been one constant you've noticed that seems to be the same. Your time in all these different countries and cultures, has there been one constant you've noticed that seems to be the same no matter where you go? Yeah, absolutely. I think you can always count on humans to be either really nice or really terrible. That's really it. I like to give people the benefit of the doubt and hope that they're going to be good and kind and hospitable, but you always have to have your guard up no matter what. Martin Larson, thank you very much. Jace Ace, thank you very much. Simon Mayo, thank you. Pasky303, only when you lose it, you realize what you had. True to the core. One day, Hong Kong will be free. Yep, that's right. Only when you lose it. And that's what's happened to a lot of people in South Africa now. You know, a lot of people, it's a tough situation. The majority of South Africans, they still love South Africa that have left. They still love the place, but there's a reason they had to leave, and there's a reason why they left, you know. Mortis Stritmatter says, agree completely, the West is great, and people who experience other places know why. Yes. Loro Imperial says, don't mean to be negative, but by the time your daughter is the age you are now, whites will be a minority in the US, and it will probably be like South Africa. I highly doubt that. I really, really highly doubt that. And don't forget, my daughter's half Chinese. You know, it's a different kind of thing, but I really highly doubt that. I think America has a lot of promise, and I know there's a lot of fear mongers and so on, but don't forget, South Africa is a basket case because of the corrupt communist leadership. That's the main reason why it's in so much trouble. Okay, Analysis 101. Hopefully your daughter will be able to understand her Chinese and her American sides. Chinese and American cultures both have some good aspects. Yeah, obviously, I mean, and my South African background too. Hopefully she'll grow up a rounded individual and be able to take the positives from all different sides. And finally, hey man, from 3D Head Tutor, hey man, I really enjoy your videos. Keep it up. Thank you. Julian, I'm from South Africa. I'm married to a Chinese woman, mixed race child, lived in China, had friends and family murdered by blacks. You give us in South Africa a voice. Yeah, you know, it's a tough thing. I've had a number of people and friends murdered, and it's a tough thing to deal with. If it hasn't happened to you, and God forbid it ever happens to you, I don't want it to, it changes your life. It changes your perspective on everything. When you've got somebody very close to you who's murdered, especially in a brutal way, it does change the way you think about things. Anyway, that's really it for today, guys. That's all I have for you. I hope you enjoyed this stream. I hope I answered some questions for you. One thing I wanted to wrap up, some people were asking what happened to the secretary, Wendy, who was, part of that armed robbery or the home invasion with my mother and all that. She also got chucked in the trunk of the car and stuff. She resigned 4 days later, understandably, and she was fine. And that's it. Thank you very much for watching, everybody. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next week. We'll be back to the China content.